So yesterday I uploaded my video talking about the Portland Trail Blazers, and you guys seem to really enjoy that video, so I do appreciate the comments, the support, and you guys giving your opinions in the comments on that video too. And I'm going to put out another pretty interesting opinion video, I think, or at least I hope, because I'm going to talk about the Washington Wizards, who I think are going to make a really significant leap next year. They're going to go from being the single worst team in the league, and them only getting 17 wins to what I believe could be, I think, on the low end, a 40-win season. I think that there is a very real chance that this Washington Wizards team, if healthy, and it might be a big if given, Trae Young's injury concerns, Anthony Davis's injury concerns, but if healthy, I think that this team could be competing for at least 40 wins, and if not, they could be competing for any of these sort of areas in the playoff conversation, because the Eastern Conference was so competitive last year. There was only 2 wins separating the 9 seed to the 5 seed, and I think that maybe if it's this competitive again, even though a lot of these teams around them have got better, a lot of teams haven't really made moves. I would argue the Hornets have gotten worse, the Bucks have gotten worse, the Bulls will be about the same, the Pacers will get better. I do still believe that the Wizards can insert themselves in this level of conversation in the Eastern Conference, and maybe get these young guys, this young team still, the guys that they've really been able to pick up during the rebuild, some playoff experience, because at the moment you could maybe argue that we've been seeing a pretty major, a major sort of change, because they have made big moves. They traded, of course, for Trae Young for not a lot. Seemed more like a salary dump than anything for the Hawks, and they've given Trae Young a massive contract. But at that time, I think a lot of people viewed that as, you've got Trae Young, you've got a point guard, you've got someone that can really facilitate an offense, and you're going to find out how good is Alex Sarr, how good is Keyshawn George, how good is Will Riley, how good are these guys that you've been drafting, these guys that haven't maybe had a point guard that can set them up as well as Trae Young possibly can. And then I think they may or may not have just seen an opportunity to get Anthony Davis for what was not a lot off the Mavericks, and I think maybe the Mavericks just kind of wanted to move on from the Anthony Davis era, because of course it did probably still leave a little bit of a sour taste in Mavericks fans' mouths regarding the Luka trade, but I'm sure you probably don't want to hear about that. But at the end of the day, you got Anthony Davis and Trae Young on the same team now, and I feel like that's really interesting. Yes, they have not played a game against each other, so you definitely could see how that could go, but there's also some pretty sneaky pieces in here. Chris Middleton was really clutch for the Bucks. Of course, I'm a Portland Trail Blazers fan, so I was watching the Bucks when Damian Lillard was on there, and Chris Middleton, despite being quite old, is a really sneaky player. I feel like he could be a sneaky mentor for these guys, for AJ Dybantsa, for Alex Sarr even, and also, of course, for Will Riley, who isn't in this list by Jake Weinbach, but has been having a pretty good summer league for himself. And then Trey Johnson, who they did draft very recently, of course, with a number 6 pick in 2025, showed up in the Summer League, and we're not going to see him in the Summer League again, it seems, because he had a massive game. In AJ Dybantsa's debut, of course, against the Jazz and Darren Peterson, Trey Johnson dropped 11 for 20 with 26 points. And then he did not return in the Kings game. So I feel like we probably won't see Trey Johnson again until the season starts. But as I said, this is a team that's got a lot of young talent. It's a young team that did manage to only get 17 wins, but now you've added the number 1 pick in a loaded draft, AJ Dybantsa. If it was a different draft, you could have seen Darren Peterson go number 1. You could have seen Cam Boozer go number 1. You could have seen Caleb Wilson go number 1. But AJ Dybantsa was chosen by the Wizards over all of those really talented guys, and we've seen him show up now. Once again, it is the Summer League, but a lot of things that we saw from him in college have now really started to translate. The 3-point shot didn't really land against the Kings, but he's been shooting these threes. And here's the thing about the 3. He attempted 6 threes in the Summer League matchup and only got 1 of them. Will Riley went 6 for 8 from 3 with 32 points. I feel like as a Wizards fan, you've got to be impressed by that development. He probably will eat up the Chris Middleton minutes as mentioned here, but he's going to get open looks under Trae Young. He's going to be able to do his own sort of thing under Trae Young. I don't think Anthony Davis, even at power forward, is going to really be handling the ball all that much. I don't think that Keyshawn George, I did watch a bit of Keyshawn George last year because he was on my NBA fantasy team when he was given a great season at moments, even though he was quite inefficient. I don't think he's going to take the ball off you too much, so I really think that Trae Young, despite really loving to have the ball in his hands, might have to give up a little bit of time with the ball in his hands for AJ Dybantsa, but I do think that the Wizards coaching staff really could cook up a very fun offense on this team. Now, the issue, of course, with Trae Young on the floor is going to be the defense. I know initially I did think that Trae Young's defense was a bit overblown, but it is true. You do see him out there. He is quite small. A lot of these small guards, when they're surrounded by guys that are about 7 foot tall, especially some teams, I'm just going to mention the Bulls because I like the Bulls, are trying to get bigger, longer. These small guards are going to continue to look smaller, but I mean, at the end of the day, we did just see the Knicks one with a small guard, Jalen Brunson, but I think Trae Young's just so good of a playmaker. As I did mention, he's just going to open up the opportunities for the young guys. And Trae Young, as I was going to talk about here with the stats tab, has averaged about 10 assists a game throughout his entire career, which is just an unbelievable number. He didn't play much last year. Of course, he had the injury concerns on the Hawks. He had the injury concerns on the Wizards, and I think the Wizards just chose to end up sitting him, which was very understandable. Anthony Davis has been about a 20 to 25 point per game scorer throughout most of his recent career. Maybe with Trae Young sitting him up, that could be more, especially now that he's going to play power forward. Anthony Davis doesn't like playing center. Anthony Davis likes to play power forward. And then Alex Sarr is going to be that starting center over DeAndre Ayton, who I even completely forgot to talk about. But DeAndre Ayton, he's had his moments. That's the thing about Ayton, though. He's quite inconsistent. Seems to play hard sometimes, seems to not. But I do think that Alex Sarr, he made a massive second-year leap. The field goal percentage increased dramatically. And once again, he's going to have Trae Young sitting him up now instead of Keyshawn George, or even instead of Trey Johnson III. Keyshawn George had a big step up in general in his second year too. As I said, the inefficiency was there at moments, but he had some games which he was just going crazy. And that's the thing about the Washington Wizards. I went on the Reddit. I found this prediction here by someone in the Reddit, and they are predicting a reality of a 30-win season. Now, I actually do believe that the season's going to be a lot better than 30 wins. And I know that this is a very long chat here, but someone did here saying that they think again 50 plus wins. I think that's a little bit too excited, to be honest with you. But I honestly do believe that they've got something here that was going to get them 40 plus wins, or around that 45 win mark. I think would be maybe around the high end. I don't think 50 plus is going to be too much. I don't think as well that they're going to tank again either, because you've got Trae Young and Anthony Davis on the team. You've just paid Trae Young a bunch of money. I think Trae Young's going to play as hard as he can. He's going to set up the young guys as much as he can. A worst case scenario, you're the 8th, 9th, 10th worst team in the league. You're going to be getting that top 5 pick, or at least a good chance of a top 5 pick. This is how I like to visualize the draft. I'm a very visual person. When it was first announced that they were changing it, I just could not understand it necessarily. So teams are still going to tank. Don't get me wrong. I look at the Chicago Bulls, a team that I quite like. I like Caleb Wilson a lot. The Chicago Bulls are building a roster to be anywhere between the 4th worst and the 10th worst team in the league. The Chicago Bulls are building a roster to end up here. Do I think that the Washington Wizards are going to be here? I don't think so. I think they're going to be more so here, so you're still going to have a chance at that number 1 pick, especially if you're a 9 or 10 seed, or even 7 or 8 seed maybe. But that's just my opinion so far. I think that the Wizards have been very overlooked. A lot of people are sort of joking about the Wizards. Yeah, I understand that they had the worst record in the entire league last year, but they've just made 2 massive moves. They've just got AJ Dybantsa. This is going to be a sneaky team. I think it's going to be a sneaky team that could get around 40 wins. Let me know what you think in the comments below.